I made this crazy Halloween cake for my daughter-in-law, who is absolutely crazy about Halloween. And what's so wonderful about it is that it will last year after year after year. It's very sturdy and it will really take a beating. One of the things that makes this cake last so long is because it's coated with resin. The goopy frosting is actually plaster of Paris. Ooh, don't get scared. Plaster of Paris is easy to work with and it's not very expensive either. That's a good thing. And resin is a lot easier than you might think. I found a resin that doesn't seem to give off a harmful odor. I like that a lot because I was working in my kitchen. Learn from my tips that I discovered as I went along. This is a really fun project for Halloween, so let's get started. Here's a list of materials. I'll explain where to get things as I go along. Plaster of Paris. Your best buy for plaster of Paris will be at a DIY building store. But if you don't want 25 pounds, go to a craft store like Hobby Lobby or Michael's. Resin keeps everything sticking together and prevents embellishments from falling off. The Hey Clear brand had really good reviews, so I purchased a simple kit on Amazon. I prefer to use a good brand of wood glue. It bonds quickly and very strongly. You'll want things to hold together under the weight of all that plaster of Paris. Choose a nice opaque formula of acrylic paint. In other words, it'll go on thickly and not show through. You might want to get white plus black so that you can mix different shades of gray. Many products from the grocery store come in round boxes. Be sure to save them, but if you're in a hurry, dump the products into a plastic bag and use the box. The pricier option is to order them from Amazon. I make a combination of found boxes plus those that I make on my own. I'll demonstrate how to cut these boxes to the perfect size that you're looking for. Decoration is the fun part. I ordered plastic spiders from Amazon. I know it's a little weird, but years ago I saved a dead lizard that I found in my backyard. This is the perfect time to use it. Now he or she has been immortalized on my cake. Yep, you guessed it. This is also part of my collection of found objects in my yard. No, I don't have cockroaches this big at my home. I ordered these from Amazon. Be sure to block out a few days for this project because it needs to allow for drying time. Never fear, making your own layer is easy as pie or cake. I used some plates to draw circles onto corrugated cardboard from an old shipping box. One was 10.5 inches, the other circle was 8 inches. Place the cardboard with the circle over a protective piece of other cardboard. Cut lightly around the circle and then heavier the next time around and the next until you get all the way through with the knife. Be sure to cut in the other direction from your fingers and arteries in your arm. Cut around the circle with a box cutter knife. You will need 2 cardboard circles for each layer. In other words, it's going to look like a drum. Trim the edges for a nice even fit for the wraparound piece of stiff paper. Now you can cut some sturdy paper, but not too thick, so that it'll fit all the way around the edge of the circle. You don't need to be too careful about it because you're going to fine-tune it. Stand the stiff paper around the edge of the circle so you can make sure that the ends meet. I don't want this layer to be too tall, so I'm going to cut it down. This will probably need some adjusting until you get it exactly the way you want it. Notice how the 2 ends don't meet exactly, so this has to be adjusted. Lightly mark the height that you want this layer to be. It helps to use a felt pen so that you don't have to press too hard. Take care to cut in a straight line without making waves as you move along. That looks like a nice fit, but now I want it to be able to slant. I have to tell you, this part is a little tricky because the slant needs to be even as it goes downhill. I taped the ends together so that it would be easier to cut and not be falling apart all the time. I told you it was tricky. This is going to need a little bit more adjustment. The 2 ends need to have a little bit more tape applied again. I'm also taping the inside before I glue it. Notice I am using common wood glue. I find that it sets up very fast and it's very sturdy to hold up all the other abuse you're going to give to this cake. I'm pressing down here to make sure all the edges are meeting together nicely. To make certain that this layer doesn't stick to the cardboard below it, use a piece of wax paper underneath so that the release will be made much easier. It won't hurt to put a little masking tape on that seam again, just to make sure that it holds together. Start now to save boxes like this. It'll make the project a lot easier if you already have a box and don't have to make one. Well, I started cutting the box, but then I thought, oh, maybe I better draw a line first. You might want to use some masking tape or a rubber band to help you keep the line straight. This squishy box moves around while you're cutting, so take extra special care to keep your hands and fingers away from the knife. Here you go again. Just repeat the drum process for every layer that you want. Make sure the round piece you cut fits snugly into the drum. You don't want a lot of glue to be oozing out. There was an inset rim on this little oatmeal box, so I just cut the circle in half and fit it into that groove. And now it's pretty much even with the top of the box. Now cut another round piece for the bottom of this little drum. When that piece is finished, it'll be all ready to glue all the tiers together. Yay! After applying the glue, you may want to wait overnight until it thoroughly bonds and is nice and strong. 3 tiers for the cake, almost ready to go. Don't mind if there are a lot of drips. There are going to be many drips anyway. Even though plaster of Paris will be applied, the cake will actually be quite light. I decided to take the rim off this box because it might be a little tricky to remove it later on. Take the time to keep your knife sharp by snapping off part of the blade. A nice sharp blade will help you avoid accidents. That sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Now it's time for the top layer. Trace around it just like the others and then cut it out. If the cardboard is thin enough and you don't mind ruining a pair of scissors, go ahead and cut it out with scissors. So here's what's going to be the spooky 4-tiered crazy cake. First, arrange how you want the tiers to stack. Make a thin stream of glue at the bottom of each tier. Gently rub your finger along the line of glue to make sure there is even contact. Don't skip this part. It's time to spray the cardboard with a protective paint. I found the best paint for this job is Rust-Oleum's 2X paint and primer. Be sure it is thoroughly covered to keep moisture from working on the cardboard and the paper. Things are getting exciting. It's time for the plaster of Paris. I put a little too much water in this plaster, but it worked. It's really essential to work quite speedily with plaster of Paris because it sets up very quickly. I used an empty yogurt container to mix in enough water to make the plaster of Paris just runny enough to pour over the layers like a cake frosting. This is optional, but you can add some school glue to the plaster of Paris to help it not set so fast. And also, it makes it a little smoother. A wooden paint stirrer is helpful in this part to aid you in spreading the plaster of Paris around evenly or unevenly, as you may prefer. You can see how the little high work table that I made helps me in this process. Check out my other video on how to make a very high work table. It's very easy and only took me a couple of days off and on. This is an earlier attempt with the plaster of Paris. It was really too thin, and then I used a spatula to add some more to the bottom. This is not a very successful application method. It helps to tilt the cake while you pour on the plaster of Paris. Then it doesn't puddle in the next layer below. Even though plaster of Paris will set up very quickly, it'll take a while to dry. In other words, the plaster of Paris is going to feel cold to the touch as it moves along its path in the curing process. In this project, I learned as I went along. So I got the bright idea to add paint, that's acrylic paint, to the plaster of Paris. Then I didn't have to paint it. Just remember that the plaster of Paris will probably dry lighter. So this mixture of plaster of Paris, glue, and paint needs to be a little darker. If you haven't tinted the plaster of Paris, you can paint it at any time or change the color. Just use acrylic paints. On my first resin cake, I painted and repainted at least 7 different times. Kept changing the colors because I just wasn't happy with it. Use a piping bag to decorate this cake just like you would any other when you use frosting. Except this frosting might break a crown. Where did the green come from? Well, it's one of my failed color attempts. I later painted it out with gray paint. Use a garden hose outside to wash out the bucket of plaster of Paris. Otherwise, you might clog up your kitchen drain with concrete. Now it's time for the really fun part. Let's get really creative with all the Halloween decorations you can think of. My glue of choice for this part of the project is E6000. You can find it in small and big tubes in Walmart, craft stores, DIY stores, or, of course, Amazon. Nobody likes cockroaches in the pantry, but on the cake, ooh, they look great. By September, the Dollar Tree store ought to have lots of little Halloween embellishments. This E6000 glue is strong enough to attach spiders with just their tippy toes. Then, after you apply the resin, these spiders are not going to crawl anywhere. See how their legs kind of form an arch? They didn't come that way. I briefly floated a match underneath them very, very quickly to make their legs melt just a little bit. Then I quickly bent them in the direction I wanted them. Don't let the flame under them stay too long or the whole spider will melt away. I used a red candle to create drips on the candle that was on the cake. It helps to tilt the cake like this to be able to have the drips go in the right place. Don't forget that you are playing with fire here, so be very careful. And this is not a project for children. I finished off the cake by pouring a combination of black and red nail polish coming out of the top of the candle. I had so much fun making a Halloween cake that I made another one. And then I thought I might even sell them in my Etsy shop. I have a box full of Barbies that need a purpose. I made a candle Barbara out of this one. Simulate blood by mixing black nail polish with deep red. Can't find any black lace? Just use the 2X Rust-Oleum to paint it black. In digging around my sewing notions, I found just the right amount of black trim to put on the bottom of the cake. When it's time to put on the resin, it's time to also put on the gloves. If you happen to forget your gloves, use this hand cleaner to get it off. It works pretty good. I found that pouring the resin on the cake does not work as well as brushing it on, but be sure to use brushes that you can throw away after, because you will not be able to wash that resin out. The resin will soak into the plaster of Paris, so the next day you will need a new brush and some more resin to give the cake a second coating. There you have it, complete directions for making a Halloween spooky cake. If you like this project, please subscribe because I have a lot of fun ideas for you to have busy days and they equal to a happy life. So goodbye and hope to see you later.